Hello, and welcome to the Biomass Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Anna Simet. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I have with me my friend Brian O'Connor, president of Palm City, Florida-based Air Burners. If you are an avid reader of Biomass Magazine, you might recall a feature story we did on them a couple years ago called Behind the Curtain. And you can search bmm.com and pull it up if you're curious. Maybe one of the top 10 stories I've ever written. It was super interesting, and it details Brian's journey to get Air Burners where it is today. But anyway, I'm rambling on here, so let me introduce our guest, Brian. Hi. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Absolutely. My pleasure. How are you doing, Anna?
I am doing awesome. And I know how busy you are right now, especially with a big, exciting event approaching. So it's really much appreciated. And I think to start, let's have you give our listeners a high-level overview of Air Burners and what you guys do, and maybe a little bit about your background as well.
Sure. Well, let's see. Let me smash 29 years into a couple of minutes,
Right.
as best I can. So yes, we've been around for 29 years now, and basically about the 30 years ago, I built a couple of companies that I've owned and sold, and by trade, a mechanical engineer. And I like designing things. And I've always been a bit of an environmentalist. I'm probably not a crazy environmentalist out there, blocking people and won't let owls and, all that kind of stuff anyhow. But I do worry about our environment, as I think everybody should, because, the air we breathe is the only air that we will ever get. So we should take care of it as best we can. And one of the things, being a longtime asthma sufferer, one of the things that always triggered me was the particulate matter in the air, smoke and other particulates. And I came across this technology called air curtain. And basically, in a quick summary, it's if you can put a curtain of air at a particular mass flow and velocity over a fire, an open burn basically, that's contained on four sides, then it works as sort of a lid. And what happens is the particles of smoke will rise up on the hot gases, they encounter the air curtain, and they stall there for fractions of a second, and they reburn. So if you get it right from a design standpoint, the purpose of an air curtain is to create a secondary burn chamber. And so you essentially reburn the smoke and down to an exceedingly small, hopefully, particle size that won't affect you. And with our friends at the EPA, we've learned long ago that PM, particulate matter size of 2.5 microns is the particle size that gets past all of our body defenses and lands in our lungs. So, we wanted to see if we couldn't figure out, well, at the time it was just me, but I wanted to figure out if I could make a machine using this air curtain technology that would control these particulates down to 2.5 microns. And, the quick answer is, yeah, we did that. So our machines have been tested by everybody you could imagine, including the US EPA. And we've been tested in 10 different countries by air quality agencies, and, California and the United States, Canada and North America here. And then the one probably, I don't know, badge of honor, we would call it anyhow. We were really honored to be asked to be a CRADA partner with the US EPA. And a CRADA partner, CRADA stands for Cooperative Research and Development Associate or, program. Anyhow, they've only ever offered this to about 30 or 40 companies in the whole history of the EPA. So it was pretty exciting to get. And we were a CRADA partner with the EPA for 7 years. And that gave us an incredible opportunity to work with them to say, look, what about this and what about that? And they say, no, you can't because, and they've got an incredible staff of engineers and scientists. And I mean, I know we all complain about the EPA every now and then, but, we're really talking about the bureaucrats. I want to talk about all the fine folks that work there because, there is an amazing staff. So we've learned a lot. We were able to, push our air curtain and make it even better. And we've learned a lot through that association. So that was really helpful in the early days. And that's kind of the founding of us. Then we started building these machines that could be used out in the forest or land clearing jobs. And instead of open burning, you would burn the wood naturally inside, our machine. And the one clarification I'd like to make is people call our machines incinerators. By any technical description, our machines are not incinerators. There are no hydrocarbon-based fuels supporting combustion. The wood just burns naturally. So we throw wood waste in there. We have to use something like a propane, weed burner type of thing, get the fire started, and then it's kind of like a campfire. It just burns away in these large fireboxes that we build. And then, of course, we add the air curtain, and it's the air curtain that traps the smoke particles like I was describing. But there's another benefit too, and this is one of the reasons they've become so popular, is that not only are they good environmental means of protecting the environment anyhow and reducing smoke, but because of the amount of air that we have to put over and under and around the firebox, the fires burn somewhere around 40 times faster than an open burn. And so there's an economic component in all of this. So somebody that's, getting rid of, like when they do forestry work, of course, there's the waste is called slash, which is the branches and things that everybody pulls off the trees. And then if you're doing land clearing, you have whole trees and things are getting rid of. And as you know, a lot of times they just open burn these, but this is a much better way and significantly faster. So that's kind of good. It's at least it promotes using an environmental machine, which is nice. So that's the beginning of air burners anyhow. Is that?
Yeah, that was perfect. I think it's a good segue to my next question. So, you talked about all the testing and the emissions component. Tell us a little bit more about who buys your machine. I know CAL FIRE is a customer. What is your biggest market?
It varies every year. I would generally say forestry, but also land clearing. But land clearing goes up and down based on basically the home building market. If homes are selling and they're cutting down trees to make timber and that sort of thing, then we sell more machines into the land clearing market. But as you know, that fluctuates like oil, it's up and down. So that would be sometimes our first and sometimes our second most popular market. Then after that, it would be agriculture. We sell a lot of machines into agriculture, and probably right around in the third space, between second and third space, probably is also just municipalities. A lot of people aren't aware that this wood waste problem is beyond enormous. You can't go to a landfill and not see huge piles of this wood waste everywhere in the world, quite honestly. And the real difficulty is that the current method of supposedly getting rid of vegetative waste is to grind it up and take it to a landfill. And a lot of people think, well, if you grind it up, great, we've made mulch. Everybody wants that for their garden. The answer is no, they don't. There's just literally billions of tons of vegetative waste just in the United States. And you're lucky if you could use, maybe 1 million tons into chips around your gardens. So it's a huge, huge problem. And personally, and this is one of the reasons I spent the time developing the machine that makes energy, the biocharger now, it's just that we shouldn't just throw it away or burn it up. We ought to try to capture some of the energy that, it was one of the first energy sources on Earth, right? Wood. Yeah. So we ought to at least consider using it, So that's kind of where we end up selling the machines, the standard fireboxes, and now the power generating ones.
Let's move into that more. Can you talk a little bit more about what you guys offer and then tell us about the biocharger? That is so cool.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. If you get to airburners.com, you'll see we make about, a dozen different machines, and we seem to be adding more all the time. We started with I started, unfortunately, by myself with the biggest machine that we currently have. I don't know why I did that, but it was a bit of a challenge because the thing weighs 65,000 pounds, and it's 40 feet long and about 12 feet tall and 12 feet wide. It can go through 15 tons of vegetative waste in an hour. And you're left with clean carbon ash, which is really great because you want to turn that into the soil. So it works out really good for forestry or land clearing. But from the large firebox, we started selling machines into Europe And so I designed a smaller one that would fit in the ocean containers, the IOTA containers.
Yep.
And that's what we now call our 100 series. Our largest one is what we call the 300 series. And then we have one in between, we call it 200 series, which is actually our most popular. And that particular firebox is designed to go, it's as big as you can get it to go on a truck to haul anywhere in North America and not have to have a oversized road permit, So it's 102 inches wide, whereas our 300 series is basically the largest machine we could make that can come fully assembled. You get any bigger than that, and you have to have some assembly required. But right now, it's always been my goal that none of our machines need to be assembled on site. They all come ready to go. So you bring the firebox in, either a 100 series, 200, or 300 series, drop it down, you're ready to go. And then we make, as I think you know, Anna, we've recently collaborated with the U.S. Forest Service under another one of these CRADA partnerships to develop the unit that makes biochar. And we actually got a couple companies that are copying our machine now, so I think that's a nice compliment.
I'd say so.
Yeah, but this, we designed a smaller unit that we call the Burn Boss, which is fundamentally operates exactly the same as our big fireboxes, but it's a small towable, 12-foot long, 4-foot wide, 4-foot deep firebox. And you could tow it with an F-250 or something like that. And the Forest Service asked us, they said, that's really handy for wildfire mitigation work, but we would really like to start making biochar, which is fundamentally charcoal, right? And so we worked for a couple of years with the Forest Service and developed this new machine that got a lot of these bio things going on here, but we call this the Char Boss. And the Char Boss will, the same process. It's sort of 12 feet long, the same size as the little Burn Boss. But there's a conveyor system in it, and there's a quenching system, and out the back comes this beautiful biochar. And our little machine will make about 400 pounds of biochar an hour. It'll eliminate somewhere around 1.5 tons of vegetative waste an hour. So far it's been a big hit. It's a pretty popular little machine, easy to get around, that kind of thing. So it's a slightly smaller one, and let me just clarify that our machines, you're only allowed to use clean vegetative waste per the EPA. We can't use any painted woods or plywoods they're meant purely for clean wood waste. So there's, so the contribution to the atmosphere is all natural, right? When people ask, what about all the CO2 coming off the top of your fireboxes? Well, that's the CO2 that was sequestered in the tree, when it gave off oxygen, right? So it's the green cycle of life. So we haven't added any extra CO2, unlike a grinder or tractors or trucks that are nothing but, CO2. Our machine and their CO2 is coming, of course, from, dinosaurs.
Right.
It's been turned into oil, right? Our CO2 was sequestered in the tree, and people say, yeah, but it's still CO2. It is, but that CO2 was coming out no matter what. You chop the tree down. We didn't chop the tree down. Somebody chopped the tree down, right? And so now the CO2 starts coming out. So it's not additive, it's the residual CO2 that exists. Part of the reason that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and also the US EPA and virtually all of the environmental agencies don't consider that CO2 to be additive to the world's problems. It's neutral. So.
Brian, how much ash is produced? I was going to ask you that. Can you quantify that at all?
Yeah, we can. It's somewhere around 2% residual ash in our normal machines, not the Char Boss, okay? Because the Char Boss, we're trying to pull it out prior to ash. We're trying to pull it out in little, charcoal nuggets. But generally speaking, it's about 2% clean carbon ash, and as I said, that, everywhere in the world, they generally will allow it to just be turned right into the soil because that's naturally what happens, right? So we can get rid of about 98% of the mass. And that's one of the items that people forget about. Our machine actually eliminates Whereas they say, well, put it in a grinder, but you put 10 tons in a grinder and you get 10 tons out. It doesn't eliminate, it just changes the volume.
Right. Yeah.
So
Okay. So biomass energy, we know there's controversy among certain groups using trees for power or really using trees for anything for that matter. In this current landscape of uncontrolled forest fires, forest health, and so on, can you talk about where air burners fits in here and the positive impact that your technology could have?
Well, it's a great question that could go for an hour easily, and I'll try not to. But but let me first talk about the amount of waste as an example. And this is part of what, as I said a few minutes ago, that people either don't understand or don't get right or ignore. But the U.S. Forest Service went in the Sierra Nevada range, which is a mountain range in California, between Nevada and California, and they literally counted the number of dead trees, that are standing dead trees. And they counted somewhere between 101 and 110, million dead trees. That's a lot of trees.
Yeah.
That's about 1 billion tons of vegetative waste that is absolutely no good. There's not a thing we can do with it. People say, oh, turn it into lumber. Generally speaking, we can't. There's a little bit of it you can, and if we can, we should. But there's basically nothing we can do with that stuff. That's one mountain range in California. This problem is, if anybody's ever flown across the United States and sat by the window and you look down at all those pretty orange trees, they're not losing their leaves. They're conifers. They're dead, and there's just millions and literally billions and billions of these. We have so much dead vegetative waste, as I said earlier, that people just can't comprehend how much there is. So we ought to be considering how we handle this stuff. And right now, what we're doing is we're grinding it up, we're hauling it to a landfill, and we're dumping it in landfills for 80 or 90% of this vegetative waste. And that's just wrong. I mean, it's just such an incredible environmental impact. We shouldn't be doing that as a world community here. We should find better ways.
The emissions just from transporting all that material, right?
Exactly. I mean, most of these grinders, if you're going to grind up a 6 or 8 inch diameter, and don't get wrong, I'm beating up on grinders and I apologize because they're great machines used correctly, but or in their market, this shouldn't have been their market, But the grinders, most of these grinders, if they want to grind up a 6 to 8 inch diameter log, they're going to burn somewhere between 50 and 75 gallons of diesel fuel an hour to do that. That's a lot of diesel fuel, right? And this is happening all over the United States and arguably all over the world, because we've said, well, that's the best way to do it. And we haul it down the mountain in a truck, which burns more. And then we dump it in a landfill, and all it does is sit and outgas. Yeah. Even worse, chips will leachate in and they'll go septic and they create methane. I mean, we don't produce any methane in our machines. Mother Nature never created methane, in the forest. So the point is we need to handle our vegetative waste. It's a huge problem worldwide. It's just a huge problem. And it's not going away anytime soon. So as I said before, I think the more important thing is that we ought to consider pulling the energy out of that. And of course, that was my goal in developing the machine we call the biocharger, which is a portable biomass energy system, which is the one you've been alluding to that we're doing the demonstration on here in a couple of weeks down here in Florida.
Tell us more about that.
Sure. So basically, it took a while to be able to design this because there wasn't a good generator out there until a company called Electrotherm came up with a 100 kilowatt, reasonably priced organic Rankine cycle generator. And fundamentally, then what we do is we have one of our standard fireboxes, pretty much standard, electrically driven. We capture some of the heat off of that firebox. We send it into what we call our power module. And in there, it goes through, the heat gets converted to a working fluid, and the fluid is then vaporized, spins a turbine, pretty classical kind of, power generation, spins a turbine. and then it makes electricity. And then that fluid, is sent out to a cooling facility, what we call a cooling module, and it's condensed back again from a vapor to a liquid, and the cycle continues. There are 4 components to it: the firebox module, power module, cooling module, and the battery storage module. So, and all of our systems are what we call closed loop systems. So they never have to be refilled with fluids of any sort, and none of that is allowed to escape into the atmosphere, although it's just basically steam. The battery module, we've worked with Rolls-Royce. They've developed a really nice battery for us, a 550 kilowatt hour battery. And we send all of that electricity into this battery. So we have these 4 components. They're all, really rugged pieces of equipment. They're built on skid bases, so you can drag them around on a site. You can set the whole system up in about 4 hours and switch it on. You're making electricity. And then generally speaking, you run the electricity into our battery storage module. And the battery storage module then will, hold on to that energy. But the point of the battery storage module is to allow you to use battery operated equipment up in the forest. States like California, Oregon, Washington, they've got legislation out now beginning to require machines in the forest, sort of, I think it's 50 horsepower and below. Next year, I think, will have to be battery powered. And most all of the equipment manufacturers, Cat, Deere, Volvo, Doosan, all these people, they all make battery powered equipment. And of course, the first thing you ask with the battery powered equipment is, well, how do I charge it when I'm up in the forest? Well, our new system, the biocharger, will allow you to get rid of your waste, the slash that you're creating in a forestry operation or in a land clearing operation, and will allow you to power your electric equipment. We can put enough power into our Rolls-Royce batteries that you could power about 6 or 8 machines on site. So typically how the system would be used is that you would eliminate the waste all day long, and then at night you'd bring all the machines around and plug it in, right? And they would recharge, and in the morning you'd show up. The battery will power up the firebox and all the rest of the systems and get it going again. It starts generating electricity. Once the system's up and running, it powers itself, and the excess, which is significant, is put into the battery to store for use, like I said. So it's the first portable biomass energy system that we're aware of in the world. So
that's awesome.
And we're hoping that there'll be a new sort of methodology in the forest. One, I've kind of coined a phrase, and I know the Forest Service is starting to use it, called the electric forest. And the idea is that you could have a biocharger, this machine sitting there, eliminating your waste, making electricity, storing it in the battery. You can be working around with electric equipment. In addition, you could be running electric equipment, say, a mile down the road. We've also collaborated with Volvo construction equipment, because Volvo, in my opinion, makes the best battery-powered equipment in the world, and they are certainly one of the leaders in battery-powered equipment. So they advise us on where that technology is going. So Volvo has, and a couple of other companies have done this, but they have a portable battery. It's about a 500 kilowatt hour battery, and they even have a bigger one. And these batteries, they're on a trailer, and you can tow them with like a big pickup truck, So if you could imagine, you bring the battery over to the biocharger, you plug it in, you're charging the battery up all day long, and you're eliminating your waste. Then you take your battery, your portable battery, and you run that mile down the road, and you charge up those pieces of equipment. The other pieces of equipment near the biocharger get charged at the biocharger, and you sort of get the idea. It's a whole new methodology for working in the forest, and it allows us, the biocharger is also set up. If you get a chance to look online at some of the pictures, you'll see there's kind of a breezeway in the middle of it, and then there's a table in there and lights and stuff, but there's also standard 120 volt AC plugs, there's 5 volt DC plugs, so you can charge any power tools, you can charge your phones, you can charge radios, things like that out in the forest as well. So
That's
So
so cool. Yeah, I
thanks.
love it. Well, we look forward to covering the demo. And so, question, let's see, someone likes what they see. Are they available
They
to?
are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're available now. Just, if you're at the demo, obviously, there'll be plenty of salespeople around. We're glad to
Yeah.
talk to you. If not,
Okay.
just call into the factory and ask for one of the salespeople, and they can explain it. There's a lot of information on our website at airburners.com.
Yes. And cool videos. I mean, I've watched a bunch of them too on YouTube, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, we've tried to
Yeah.
we're making one for the, our marketing firm is putting together a really nice, well, I hope it'll be a really nice, of course, video from this demo that we're running here the first week of March. And so that we will post on the website for people that can't make it. And we have the unit here available. One of the things we're working on now with the U.S. Forest Service is potentially to pack up the system and take it out west, say, in 6 months when we get closer to the summer, and putting on another demonstration out in the western United States. So either in the spring or the fall, we're not sure yet, and making it available for the folks out on the west coast of the U.S.
Well, keep us in the loop on that.
Shall indeed. Shall indeed.
Well, very good. Brian, I've loved this conversation. It's been super interesting. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, sure, I'd love to add about a dozen things, but
I know, right? We could go on.
That's right. You go on forever. Obviously, I'm a tad biased, but I love what we do, and
Yep.
I'm proud that our team here has been able to do a pretty good job of helping to protect the environment. All right, so maybe in a small way, but as I said earlier, I think everybody's got to worry about this to some extent. We have to worry about our environment. It's the only one we got. So.
Well, if everyone does something small, it all adds up, right?
Yeah,
and I don't.
Exactly.
So, okay. Well, thanks again, Brian. Been awesome chatting with you, and I really look forward to hearing about how your big event goes.
Great. Thanks, Anna. I appreciate it. Good chatting with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time.